In 1973, Gibson Games released a board game that I expect many of you remember, Escape from Colditz. Designed with the help of real-life Colditz escapee Major Pat Reed, its release coincided with the airing of the BBC TV series Colditz, and there was a link. Brian Degas, a writer for the series, partnered with Major Reed and Bob Rechin to make the board game. The timing of the release, with the popularity of the show, no doubt boosted the interest and sales in the game, propelling it to commercial success. Now, I wasn't around in 1973, but I do still remember the excitement of picking it from the shelf and buying it from the shop. Such was its success that it spanned decades and generations, and most recently this is the 2016 release from Osprey Games. The thrill and the tension of devising an escape plan, collecting the kit you need, preparing the route and evading detection is a winning combination in a game that typically lasts 2 to 3 hours and builds to an extremely tense finale. Tense, that is, unless you're my mum and I've roped you into playing it because I'm a friend short. Sorry, mum. 1973 was a world before the rise of the personal computer. Computer Space launched the arcade industry in 71 before Pong took it by storm in 72, and it would be another 5 years from then that truly accessible, mass-produced personal micros would kick off the era of home computers. But those Colditz stories of daring bravery, of ingenuity in the face of certain death, the TV series, the board game, movies like The Colditz Story, and beyond Colditz, The Great Escape. It would be impossible for all of these things not to inspire and influence game developers on the subject matter when the technology finally arrived. You can imagine my delight then when, after nagging my family one more time to play the board game with me, this arrived. No, not this. This arrived, because I never actually saw a boxed copy in the shop, so mine was more like this. Somebody had actually made the board game that I loved into a video game, and I would never have to nag my mum to play it with me ever again. But if I'd seen the box at the time, I might have read this. Now is your chance to try to match their courage and determination as you attempt to guide 4 men to freedom, it reads, with 600 rooms to explore. Could it be that Digital Magic Software had created the game I didn't know I always wanted? Perhaps, but first we need to talk about that castle. I've escaped from Colditz, but what is this place? Could it be? Yes, it's PCBWay. I've found my way into the factory. Can you dig it? It's certainly possible because PCBWay provide PCB design services, manufacturing, CNC milling, 3D printing, and many more services to help you with your projects. And you can uncover a wealth of retro projects in their shared projects section and order them with just one click. Escape from bad alternatives and use PCBWay.com for all of your PCB needs. Colditz Castle is 25 miles south of Leipzig in the German state of Saxony. First mentioned in 1046 as a fortified settlement, is later referred to as a castle in 1086 after Henry III of the Holy Roman Empire encouraged the further development of it. In 1430 it was set on fire by the Hussites, who decided to have a revolution, and then it would be rebuilt 30 years later, only for a servant to then cause a fire and burn it down again in 1504. Oops. And another rebuild started in 1506. Now, before it finally found its calling as the subject of video games, Colditz served many purposes over the centuries, including that of a hunting lodge, royal residence, workhouse, mental health hospital, and of course a prisoner of war camp, specifically for POWs with a history of escape attempts or those deemed to be a high security risk. A top security camp for incorrigible prisoners, which went by the official name Oflag 4C, Oflag an abbreviation which translates to Officers Camp. This was a security camp for bad boys. But that didn't stop around 36 people escaping, however, through methods including disguising themselves as guards, tunnelling under a dentist's chair, hiding inside a well, or building an entire glider in the attic, although the camp was liberated before the famous Colditz Cock glider got to fly. Major Pat Reed, who helped make the board game, took the role of escape officer in the camp. He assisted many others before making his own escape with 3 others through a cellar out into a dry moat. He's perhaps the most famous escapee on account of his memoirs, and they were also turned into the 1955 movie of the same name, The Colditz Story. My favourite though might be the story of Lieutenant Colonel M.B. Reed, who it is said simply smoked as many cigarettes and drank as much coffee as he could before a medical examination, which then assessed he had heart disease as a result, and he was repatriated. And that's an escape method I think I'd be happy to try out for myself. It was from this rich and often romanticised history of daring British, French, American, Polish and Dutch officers escaping against all odds that legends were born, and those in turn became books, board games, and more than just one video game. Escape from prison, of course, is a simple objective which lends itself well to gaming, and we'd see that as early as 1977 in Jailbreak on the Fairchild Channel F. It was a very simple two-player game in which you had to find the weak bars to escape through a maze. But if we're specifically looking for Colditz in video games, then we should definitely start with text adventures. 1981 was a busy year. We had Escape from Colditz, which would be later released in '82 as a typing listing in computer and video games. This was by Stuart Wilkinson. There was Colditz, a Dutch VIC-20 release by Red Arrow Software by Hans-Peter Ponting, and even the Sharp MZ got a text adventure of Colditz. We then got more text in the form of Castle Colditz on the ZX81 and ZX Spectrum, all of these following a similar theme of find the kit, hide the kit, make your escape. And then Colditz Adventure came on the BBC Micro, which adds a simple visual element, an overhead map on which you're the X, the O is a manhole, and confusingly, guards are completely invisible, they just come at you out of the blue, or yellow. Over the years, there were at least 8 Colditz text adventures published from Dutch, French, English and Spanish developers, and no doubt many more made by interactive fiction enthusiasts with tools like the Quill. Some graphics at last. 1984's Phipps Associates then gave us Colditz on the ZX Spectrum. Okay, it's still another text adventure, but this time with some illustrations for the 70-odd locations. The goal in this one is to not only escape, but to first rescue another chap from solitary, take him with you, and then make your escape. Reviews were fairly warm, but it suggested that it would be more enjoyable if the player was given a map of the locations, because the prisoners would know about certain locations, the canteen, the courtyard, places like that. And that's not a bad idea. We'll come back to that later. What was a bad idea though, was Scorpion Software's Escape from Colditz in 1984, which the designer himself describes as an absolutely terrible game. The highlight is this high-quality title screen, before we're thrown into a future Colditz in which evil robots and deadly lasers are our captors, and the death screen is certainly an imaginative way to make up for not having a graphical artist on the team. Other famous prisons, of course, would get a look in too in video games. 1984's Alcatraz Harry is a notable example. While I didn't play this one at the time, it does move us away from text adventures without trying to be an arcade game. You need to collect no less than 30 items to escape. A rudimentary attempt is made at drawing buildings in its open world, or as open as a prison can be, and it's certainly not a good game by any stretch of the imagination, but it is the seed of an idea that we're now hurtling towards. It's not set in Colditz, but it's too important to ignore, and you've probably already shouted its name at your screen at least once while watching this. It is, of course, The Great Escape. Developed by Denton Designs, The Great Escape gave us one of the most striking box art and advertising images of the 80s. It was drawn by the late Bob Wakelin, and it's up there with any of the Hollywood movie posters you might have picked up at the video rental store and put on your wall. Despite Ocean's history of licensed tie-ins though, this was not a license of the Steve McQueen movie of the same name. The game gave us a detailed isometric view of a POW camp, in which you have to plan your escape while adhering to the daily routine so as not to raise suspicion. You can even take your hands off the controls and let your POW automatically carry out the routine of roll calls, meal times, exercise and bedtime tasks, and then you can control him in the gaps in between to sneak around the camp, collect and hide the things that you need to make your escape. It scored highly on its native ZX Spectrum platform and carved out a new kind of game genre that gave us action, stealth, strategy and exploration in one game. Crash Magazine scored it 96%, praising its detailed graphics, its use of scrolling instead of flip screens, and the engrossing nature of the game. Discovering tunnels only to have your kit found, or being chased by vicious dogs. There are lots of ways to try and plan your escape and lots of outcomes. Denton Designs would further the engine to create Where Time Stood Still for the 128K Spectrum in 1988, and just as The Great Escape was not The Great Escape movie, Where Time Stood Still was definitely not The Land That Time Forgot. Honest. From a great high to 1987, when Atlantis published a very forgettable game, The Colditz Story. A very odd title filled with mini-games which scored an impressively low 20% in Sinclair User Magazine. It's easy to see why, and especially with the expectation set the previous year by The Great Escape. But there was no sign here of its crown being taken. The back end of the 80s saw prison themes come and go in games like Bobo in Stir Crazy with its potato peeling minigame, Chrysalis's Prison set in the future on a distant planet, and SNK's brawler Prisoner of War in the arcade. Operation Wolf had us gunning to rescue hostages from a camp, or if you were less fortunate, Actionware's POW with its monkeys in sunglasses. But these were simple action games with a Prisoner of War link, lacking the subtleties, nuance, and the tension of that board game. And while they were not yet captured, The Lost Patrol perhaps comes close in its depiction of a Vietnam unit left behind enemy lines, combining the suspense of detection with strategy and exploration. That's not a comprehensive list by any means, but of all of them, The Great Escape is the only one that came close to the thrill of playing the Escape from Colditz board game back in the day for me. And oddly enough, I didn't even play The Great Escape on a ZX Spectrum. I used to play it in the back of a room at school on an Acorn Archimedes using a ZX Spectrum emulator. Now that's posh Spectrum gaming. Anyway, then it happened. The older lad who charged me 50p per game included a disc with Colditz written on it in the pile, and I didn't think for a second it could have anything to do with the board game. But then I loaded it up, and it was undeniable from the title screen. This was the game I so loved, Escape from Colditz, in video game form, and I could play it whenever I wanted, and I didn't even need friends. My first expectation was for it to be a turn-based board game-like game, but it was neither of those things. It was immediately recognisable as a 16-bit upgrade to The Great Escape. From the evocative title music by Bjorn Lin, and he was also known as Dr. Awesome of the Crusaders, a Norwegian demo group, to graphics with actual colour, a welcome upgrade from the black and white Great Escape, although that game did shift from white to blue to indicate the time of day, and Escape from Colditz takes a leaf out of that book with its palette that cleverly fades to indicate the time of day. I really like that effect. The game drops your 4 prisoners into the country's separated living quarters around the castle, and your job is to use them together or alone to escape. If you veer into restricted zones and are seen by a guard, you become wanted, and then if any guard catches you, it's into the cooler for you until enough time elapses to release you. Now, the first thing I enjoyed about this game back in the day was simply exploring the castle, and until I saw the original box, I had no idea it was as vast as 600 rooms. It's really easy to get lost in it, and the inclusion of a map, there's that idea back again, the inclusion of a map is a really good one. You'll remember it was suggested by 1984's Colditz Game Review, and finally here it is. Although making your own map to record where things are is also essential in making progress. Another fun element is that you can position one of the guys as a stooge while another person works on a tunnel or similar, and the stooge will alert you to a guard coming. And that is explained in a lot of detail in the book that comes with it, in the elaborate tunnel digging attempt and the stooges and the noises that they made around the camp to give an early warning of guards approaching. I have yet to find the drink all the coffee and smoke all the cigarettes before a medical option in this game, so it loses some marks for that. Lockpicks get you through low security doors, while gold and silver keys are needed for others. Candles, pickaxes, saws, fake IDs, passes, uniforms, they all feature, as well as a stone that you can throw to distract a guard. Escape from Colditz doesn't try to be the board game though. It uses the license well to market the game, and it does manage to build suspense and danger as you build your escape plan, and the fear of getting caught increases with the thought of all your hard work being undone. One thing you won't find though is a save facility, which adds to the frustration. You could perhaps enjoy it more in the modern day by using save states, but it's that frustration that would push me away and pull me back to the game again all those years ago. The magazines were generally impressed, and the game sat in the 70 to 85% score in most of them. I think a solid 85% is a fair score. CMVG though gave it its lowest score at 63%, the slow pace not to their liking, and Amiga format describing it as difficult to complete but full of little details that would appeal to the adventuresome. It wasn't setting the world on fire though, but the inclusion of Pat Reed's book The Colditz Story and the legend of the castle itself would help to elevate the experience and allow the imagination gap to be filled by all of those stories. Now, the company behind the game is Digital Magic Software, and they prided themselves on making games which ran at 50 frames per second, which Escape from Colditz mostly does, but there's certainly some slowdown throughout. And they also promised and even mentioned in the manual that a Commodore 64 version of the game would be released, but that never materialised. Their back catalogue includes lesser remembered games like Shockwave and Narcissus, but their best known title is perhaps Driving Force, a Power Drift style racing game. Here in the UK it was bundled with the Amiga if you bought one from Silica, because they included an arcade action games pack, so if you got that pack, many remember it from that. The company was set up by Jules Burt and John Law around 1989, and Jules describes the first 2 years of business as being great fun as they produced, packaged and distributed the games, sharing duties around a very small team. But in his own words, Jules wasn't aware of margins and other such important details. The company struggled to make a profit, and there would be one final release from them after Colditz, Kid Gloves 2 in 1992, before they closed their doors. It was the Colditz game though that made an impression on me. If you hadn't already guessed, I mean that's the whole reason why I'm making this video, because I remember and loved that game so much. But it wouldn't be the last time that Colditz would appear in a video game. World War II prisoner of war themed games would of course traverse genres, including the newfangled first-person shooter with Wolfenstein 3D in '92, but that didn't really scratch the strategy itch. 2001's Commandos 2 certainly does, and in that you get to break into Colditz for a daring rescue and then break out again, so I guess that counts. This remastered version of the game on Steam is as enjoyable as it ever was, and I think the engine would lend itself well to an Escape from Colditz remake someday. In 2002, Prisoner of War from Codemasters makes a pretty good attempt. While not entirely set in Colditz, it features heavily in the game, and the game's executable is even named Colditz.exe. Its controls and viewpoint feel clunky, not to mention the very dark graphics in the modern day, but familiar mechanics are there with the daily schedule, following routine, sneaking away when you can, and hiding tools. But it's also filled with missions given to you by NPCs in a Grand Theft Auto style. It feels much more claustrophobic than the '91 Colditz, and the cutscenes get tiresome. In 2003, we actually got an official game of the Great Escape movie, and it plays very much like Prisoner of War. I felt the controls in this were much more refined, and the movie soundtrack really adds to it. But it does follow the same pattern of NPC-issued tasks to traverse the levels, one of which is called The Castle and is very clearly based on Colditz, but I didn't see the name used at any point. And in 2021, we even got a brand new ZX Spectrum game on the topic called The Last Escape. Set in Colditz Castle, it too relies on you to find and stash equipment, and then rotate them in your 2 inventory slots to unlock the castle secrets and find the items you need to escape without capture by following the exit sign. There are many other examples, but for whatever reason for me, nothing quite hit the same as that 1991 game. Perhaps it's the isometric view that helps it feel closer to the board game than an action-filled FPS ever could, Perhaps it's the way you're thrown into the castle with minimal instructions and expected to feel the game out. Or maybe it's the imagination gap and the limitations in the game are automatically made up for in my own mind. Something that gets lost in the later 3D games. There always has been, and there always will be, something about Escape from Colditz that brings me back to it. It gets me frustrated, it makes me rage quit, and then it draws me back in again. And I'm not even very good at it. But back I come, partly because of the game, partly because of a prison of my own making, the nostalgia of recounting the moment that I felt unexpectedly heard by a video game. That someone actually thought it important enough to turn my favourite board game into pixels. And it would appear that it's not just me that felt that way, because in 2009 the whole game was reverse engineered and recompiled to work on modern systems. So you can try that out for yourself if you want without even using an emulator. But what I want to know off the back of this is, have you ever felt the same about a game? Have you ever felt listened to or heard by a game unexpectedly? Did something come out of the blue and surprise you and make you say, I can't believe this exists, I have to play it now? And did it surprise you and delight you, or did it completely disappoint you? Let me know your thoughts. And did you escape from Colditz? Because if you did, I need all the tips and help that I can get, so please help me out here. As always, thank you for taking the time to watch. I hope you enjoyed learning about this history lesson and I guess the DNA of Escape from Colditz, what made up this game, what came before it and what came after it, and why I love it so much and it's such a personal game to me. As always, if you'd like to come and visit and try it out for yourself here at the museum, head to retrocollective.co.uk and see when we're open. And do take a moment to subscribe. And if you really like what we do, head to patreon.com/theretrocollective and become a supporter of the channel. Thank you for watching. Take care, everyone, and bye-bye.